Good morning.
Good morning.
Very glad to be here with you. And I thank Yossi for giving such a deep and wide introduction to the war in Jerusalem. I will concentrate on the war that my brigade, 55th Brigade of Paratroopers, and my battalion, luckily, I was here. But before I start, and I'm going to talk only on the war, not areas that later were covered by many other activities that I took part in, only in the war. Who are the paratroopers that were sent to fight in Jerusalem? It was a brigade, a reserve brigade, with the 3 battalions. One, the 28th battalion, was the old-timers, soldiers, officers that took part in many operations even before 57, the Sinai campaign. The 66th battalion, headed by Yossi Yaffe, major at that time, Yossi Yaffe, were a bit younger, where many of the officers, including all of the company commanders, had some experience in previous wars. And the 3rd battalion, the youngest battalion, 71st battalion, was commanded by me. There, only the battalion commander and the deputy battalion commander, Dan Ziv, had some experience in previous wars. All of the others, soldiers and officers, did not have any experience in war. Now, something which, in my opinion, is very important to underline is the way we prepared ourselves to future wars. Arik Sharon, the well-known general, when he was major and lieutenant colonel, commanding the only paratroopers brigade, he was the best tacticians that I can talk about, and he initiated many limited operations across the borders. So what we did have experience in is one-shot operations, only one-shot operations, once in Jordan, once in Syria, once in the Gaza Strip, and so on and so forth. So the real experience of the majority of those who had experience was one-shot operations, not full war. Secondly, most of our targets in the era between 54 and 67 were either police stations or limited strongholds, not heavily built areas like Jerusalem. And only one more point that I would like to underline. I was in a paratroopers. I first started as an officer, squad commander, platoon commander, company commander, and I was wounded a number of times, and Sharon ordered me to become his intelligence officer for a year until I was healthy enough to go back to battle. And this was a very, very interesting, eye-opening year where we planned all of the operations. So in this time, after the Sinai campaign, after 57, I was already a company commander, and I spent 2 months here in Jerusalem, all around the border, and I learned quite deeply what is happening in Jerusalem. Later on, I benefited very much from it. Now, preparing for the war, all of us, we were called for to be ready to start the war, but it took almost 3 weeks before the war started. And this was a very good period to get to know each other better, to get organized, and to train for the war that was expected. And the war that was expected for the paratroopers brigade was to jump, to parachute south of El Arish, the city El Arish, and take the city of El Arish, no more. So we were preparing ourselves to fight in a very, very spread, one-story building like El Arish was. And yes, we did night jumping and getting together to be able to attack the city. We were not prepared neither to fight in the build-up areas, nor to fight in the city of Jerusalem. And when the war started, and things in the southern airport went quite smoothly, it was a war, but it was quite smoothly. We were ready, not far from the airport, in the orchard of the kibbutz Givat Brenner, ready with all of the equipment to jump south of El Arish. And not only that, there was another battalion who was supposed to land near El Arish and to bring us the heavy mortars and everything that would allow us to fight like a brigade, because you jump only with your personal arms. One point I should add, personal for this battalion. I don't know why exactly. It was a hunch, it was a prophecy, it was something that could not be explained. But I approached the director of Ben Shemen school, not far from Ben-Gurion Airport, and there was a bunch of high-rises building, ancient building, that were similar to what we will eventually find in Jerusalem. And I decided to go and train my companies one after the other in this village of Ben Shemen. The director refused to give us permission to go there. He said it will ruin the education of the children. And I persuaded him and said, look, we are going to a war, and I want to prepare my soldiers in a different area. So he agreed, and we went there, one company after the other, for the whole day. And later on, when we got to Jerusalem, we benefited very much from this very, very different, unusual way of preparing ourselves. We were supposed to jump and attack El Arish. So, noontime, the first day of the war, Monday, and we got the order not to go on to the El Arish, but to go to Jerusalem. First, the 66th Battalion, and then the other 2 battalions, and we, the battalion commanders and our company commanders, were supposed to go and meet the brigade commander Motagur in Jerusalem in the Schneller camp, where the headquarters used to be the headquarters of the Jerusalem brigade, 16th Brigade. We got there to find that it is shelled, and nobody really was there. The headquarters of the Jerusalem Brigade moved out, and Moto decided to go to some other more protected area, and there he gives the order, the general order, that the brigade is going to attack the Jordanian Jerusalem in 2 points. One, the ammunition hill, the officers' school, a building that was, to us, was the more menacing target than the ammunition hill, and the other across Sheikh Jarrah. 66th Battalion got the school at the ammunition hill, and the 71st Battalion, my battalion, got the Sheikh Jarrah site. And the old battalion, the 28th Battalion, headed by Yossi Fratkin, was to remain in the reserve just behind my battalion, 71. I must tell you that from the senior officers of my brigade, I'm the only survivor, because the brigade commander Nobotagur is dead already. His deputy Stempel was killed in Jordan Valley. Yossi Yaffe was killed going over a mine in the Sinai, and Fratkin was killed passed away after he was ill. So the only survivor of this brigade is myself, and I feel very lucky that I can meet you and talk to you about what my brigade did. We were given very limited time to go and see what is the exact place that we are going to breach, and what is the general concept of waging war in our area. Limited, but this is what we had. Now, what was known in the Central Command intelligence place, and what was known by us? There was a big difference, because the files of whatever was in Jerusalem were in the Central Command, and we went so fast, and we didn't have time to get the maps and the files about what we are going to see. So the way we were confronted in this operation was more like the operations that we did with Arik Sharon, the limited operation, one-shot operation, and not an ongoing, rolling forward war. And the only thing that helped us in this, in selecting the breaching point, was that we went from one place to the other, and we detected a point where the minefield were very narrow, and the fences were quite limited, and we were able to see where are the Jordanians along the border. So when I came back to Motagur, to the brigade commander, and presented him with my plan, he said, "Okay, this is it." And we also knew that we don't have any artillery. The only artillery that I was giving was my mortars platoon and the mortar platoon of the 28th Battalion, which was supposed to enter just after we breached the border. We went to look for our battalions that were brought to Jerusalem by buses, and were concentrated in a far further side of Jerusalem. It was quite an experience to drive in a darkened city in the night, where in the crossroads, one here and there were under shell of the Jordanian shelling, and to find the battalion ready, but without any detailed plan for the war. It took us time, and I was able to enter one of the flats that the owners were courageous enough to leave the shelter and go and give us the light in their home, and also very, very unique, different part of the history. My A company commander, Yorab Damush, got there without my knowledge a very small Israeli flag, and he took it, and only later on he was able to put this flag above the Wailing Wall after he was the first company that entered into the old city after Motagur. So something to remember, which is, of course, have nothing to do with the war, but it was something that has a lot to do with the history. Midnight, Monday, Tuesday, and we gather at the headquarters of the brigade, all the 3 battalion commanders and the other units of the brigade. And Mota asked us one by one, "Are you ready to start at night, or should we wait for the daylight?" And all of us say, night. Night, because the paratroopers, because the way we were used to do were only by night. And we felt that the night will give us some protection that cannot be given by daylight. And as far as I could remember and tell you, all the limited hours that we waged this war when it was still dark we did not have casualties. We began to have the casualties when light was on. But after the war, many questions were left. Should we wait? Should we call the Air Force? Should we have some more artillery? Should we prepare more for the war? And of course, there are different people and different answers for these questions. Ammunition Hill was a surprise for us, and the 66th Battalion were supposed to take the police officers' school, the building, and pass through the ammunition hill on the way to the Mount Scopus. But we learned the hard way that it was a much more difficult than it was envisioned, and it took the battalion commander Yosef and his deputy. It took them time to realize that something is going not the way it should be in the ammunition hill. Of course, now we know that we lost there, I think, 28 soldiers and officers that were killed, and the Jordanian had many losses. 72, I think. So it was a real bitter war, and it's here, and you can see it. Should Battalion 66 leave the ammunition hill, bypass it, and leave them just to cover them by fire and not break our heads there? It's a question. It's a question, and of course we cannot change the history. But to this question, there are many opinions, different opinions. One will say that yes, we should have, but it was to be wise after the effect. The 71st Battalion was going through. And the 28th Battalion was entering into the place where the 71 Battalion was there, waiting for the fences and for the minefield to be breached by the bungalow torpedoes. And the moment my battalion were out of this waiting area and 28th Battalion entering, they got a very heavy bombardment by mortars, and the deputy battalion commander was wounded, the doctor was wounded, and many others were wounded. And my doctor, the battalion doctor, were taking care of those who were killed. It did not prevent 28th Battalion to reorganize and to get inside the city. Leading a fight in build-up areas, being confronted by, in some cases, soldiers, good soldiers, Jordanian soldiers that were fighting, and in many areas not knowing who is who there, because they changed the uniform and were civilian for all practical purposes, and we were shot from everywhere. So it took us until noon to be able to first to fight along the border and get the majority of our losses, and then to be able to get very close to Rockefeller Museum, which was the ending line of the our first day. By the way, 3 years ago, we had a meeting here in Jerusalem between Jordanian officers and Israeli officers who took part in the war in Jerusalem. And there, by chance, while lunching, I was talking to my neighbor, a Jordanian officer, former officer, and to find out that he was a platoon commander fighting against us in Jerusalem. And he told me that he was wounded and we took him as prisoner of war. But he also told me that his was a company and their losses were 19 soldiers and officers that were killed. My losses, my battalion losses, we had another fight because there was another company inside the Jerusalem wall, were only 12. So it shows that they were fighting. And if you allow me, I happened by chance pass it to, this was the officer, very nice gentleman. He got promoted, of course, after that, but so it was a bitter war, not as difficult and not as demanding like the ammunition haul, but it was there. The end of the day, Gur called us, but only 2 battalions, 66 and 71st, because 28th Battalion was kept far away, under fire, all of the day under fire, and he couldn't get there. And the message of the brigade commander was that we are going to go on by night, again, this time, being held by another armored tank company from the... זה עוד עובד?
עובד.
He told me, the officer, he told me that he was prisoner in Atlit near Haifa, and after 2 months he was released. But before leaving it, I will tell you another thing. To my surprise, he told me that his father was also an officer in the Jordanian army. And his father was killed in an operation in 56 in Husan. And I told him, I took part in this operation. So it was such a moving moment. It didn't change his attitude. He said, because my father was killed, I decided to be an officer in the army. So this is what the war in Jerusalem brought us together. So the order was to prepare to go on and to get hold of the Augusta Victoria Hill and the Mount Olive Hill, and because my battalion was a battalion who had less losses than the others, the burden of this attack was primarily on me and other two companies of the brigade. We were ready to do that, and the tanks of the that was given us by the Harel brigade, the tank brigade, were going on, but they missed a turn and they went down and got fire from the wall, and we were trying to tell them how to go back, and Moto decided to send a platoon of one of the companies to go there and to help the tank people to change the track, and it was mixed up. But then we got intelligence announcement that the 60 tank brigade of the Jordanian were on its way to Jerusalem from the Jordan Valley. We know now that the Air Force, our Air Force, was ordered to bomb them, and they did. But we had to cancel the operation, the night operation, and we were very busy preparing whatever we could to fight the tanks that were going to meet us here in Jerusalem. They did not get here because the Air Force was quite efficient. And another thing that I could add is that in the meeting near Rockefeller Museum Tuesday afternoon, the chief rabbi, Rabbi Goren, was there. And he told me that his mother is buried in the Mount of Olives. And I promised him that when Mount of Olives will be ours, I'll take him and we'll look for his mother's grave. Nobody mentioned the old city. Nobody mentioned the possibility that we will be given an order. So we did not think of it. But there was one exception. My A company, Yoram Zamush, remember, the one who got the flag? He told me before I went to meet Gur, look, I don't know if it's a crazy idea or not, but if there will be a decision to go into the old city, I want to be the first with my company. So when the briefing of Gur was ended, I turned to Gur and said, look, there is one company in my battalion who wants to be the first to get into the old city. And what Gur said, okay. I don't know whether he was busy, whether he thought about it, but he said okay. And I took it very seriously. So, next morning, when we are about to attack Augusta Victoria Hill, there was something that was frightening as much as the ammunition hill, we thought. Later on, we discovered that it was not that bad. I asked a company commander to be in reserve to the reserve, and I gave him two of the half track that I got to evacuate the wounded a day before, and I say wait for an order. And somewhere around 10 o'clock, we finished taking the Augusta Victoria. One of my companies with the recoilless weapons were with the Motagur on Mount Olive Hill, and Mota is giving by radio the order to get into the old city. After there was a decision of the government, of course, and he said all of the battalions go to enter to the Lion's Gate. My company was quite close, and they were the first. After Mota Gur decided personally to be the first to enter into the old city, he got there, and we were after him. And it took me a while waiting for my companies to get into the old city, to get the permission of Mota Gur to look for the Wailing Wall. We did not know exactly where it is. We knew that it was down there, but I found the stairs that weren't there, and I was lucky to be the first with my people down there near the Wailing Wall. And there I'm getting the radio, by radio, from my B company, that Rabbi Goren is there with them. So I sent one soldier to the up there to lead Rabbi Goren to the Wailing Wall. He was brought down, and he was so excited that he was trying to blow the shofar, and he couldn't because he was excited. So I told him, Rabbi Goren, I'm playing the trumpet, let me blow the shofar. And he gave me the shofar, and I blew the shofar. So the Bartow's battalion commander was the one who blew the shofar after the Wailing Wall was in our hands. The war in Jerusalem was not ended yet. And after being near the Wailing Wall and after singing Jerusalem of Gold, Mota ordered us to search all three parts of Jerusalem by the three battalions, and I was at the middle, and we got all the way to the other side of Jerusalem, not without any war, because my last casualty in the war was one soldier that was killed by a stubborn, very courageous Jordanian platoon, and my deputy was wounded also, and only after I took few of my soldiers and climbed to the place where this platoon was, and after a short fight, Jerusalem, from all points of view, were ours. And we were, of course, after that, we spent the night in Jerusalem, and then we went out. Some questions. Some questions remain unanswered. I raised the question of munition hall. I raised the question of the intelligence that we did not have enough. I raised a question about how we planned the war in a build-up area. I raised a question of being prepared for a different kind of a war. I raised a question of day and night, whether it's better to have day and night. I raised the question of how efficient could be an air force in the build-up areas, and how efficient it was, and it was on preparing us to get hold of the Augusta Victoria stronghold. And another question that I think that most of us now can answer is the question, why, after such a glorious war, and after a war that any war that is not without failures, why is it that we did not indulge in a heavy, systematic search of what was happening in the war? It took us another few years. It took us the very, very bitter war of Yom Kippur of '73 to realize that, yes, even in any war, and even in such a successful war as the Six-Day War in Jerusalem, we should have applied much more time and attention to analyze what we did and what we did not. And we learned the hard way when we were confronted in the War of Jerusalem. One last word I would like to add. When I was a battalion commander, I was in the regular army, and I was the head of the branch of research and development. And I insisted on remaining a battalion commander and also leading the R&D. And I can tell you that this combination of being able to know what is war about and being an engineer and a scientist and a research and development person was a very, very good combination. And it took me way up to be the head of the R&D activities, and I was for 12 years I was the chief scientist of the Ministry of Defense, the IDF, member of the General Headquarters, being able to contribute in the areas that really matter when you understand what is the battlefield. So this was the war of the paratroopers in Jerusalem, and what it did personally to me to send me way up, luckily. Thank you.
Sir, I'm interested, when you presented your plan to your brigade commander for how you were going to attack, we come from a reasonably bureaucratic process where you go through a long planning cycle with a lot of written orders. I was wondering how you went about the plan and how you chose to present your plan to your brigade commander.
I didn't tell you the whole story because I had two alternatives. One, a creative one. And this was to surprise them and go and attack the Mittelbaum Pass, the place where usually we were sending in and out people from Jordan to Israel and back. And I was trying to persuade Gur that this surprise will help us to bypass the mines and everything. And he said, well, it's very interesting, but it's too risky, so let's go to the other program. Now, when I presented him with the second program, I did not have yet the details because we had to do that. We didn't have time. And yet, it took me a lot of time. And when I got back to Gur, it was also already dark. And he was quite worried, where am I? So he got, and the second opportunity that we had was at this midnight operation where I could tell him more in detail what I'm going to do, and he approved of the program.
Did you write it down, or was it all verbal briefing?
To write?
Did you send written orders?
No time for that. Look, the only photo that we have of Jerusalem, the brigade, was one good one, and then I used it, and I passed it away to the other brigades, the other battalions, because we had only one. Lucky luckily for me, because I was the intelligence officer of Sharon, and because I was the deputy commander of the commando platoon headed by another name, very famous Mayor Har Zion, I knew Jerusalem much more than the others. And also, not to forget, I did not mention it, but when I married my wife when we both were still students, and she studied here medicine in Jerusalem. So for 2 years, we were here in Jerusalem before the war. And on Saturday, we were going to walking through the city. So I felt very lucky to have this kind of experience, which gave me much more. And maybe, only maybe, the limited number of my casualties was partly because of my knowledge, because the brigade itself, the 55th Brigade, we had 96 dead and almost 400 wounded, and mine was only 12 and some 40 wounded. So I was able, because of knowing the terrain, to decide more efficiently what we are going to do.
So how were objectives assigned to the battalions and then?
איך קיבלת את הפקודות?
לא זה. האם רוטמן נתן משימות לפי ההיכרות שלו עם הגדודים, לגדוד הזה בגלל היוזמה, מתאים היעד הזה וכן הלאה?
It's a good question. Look, we got the orders once before it all started. I was in contact with the brigade commander very few times all along the war. We did not have any additional order until until Tuesday afternoon, when things were relatively calm. And there, near the museum, when we were going the second round of orders, it's only there that we met Gur and we could communicate. So there were not connection between the battalions. Each battalion had its own area. Having said that, I would say that it's not exactly the truth, because when I was with my headquarters in a build-up area, you have to fight. So I had my private fight, and while going from one building to the other, because they were shooting at us, so you have to take care of it, I got to cross the line where 28th Battalion was fighting. So I said hello to my friend, and I got back to my battalion. But this kind of war in the build-up area, this kind of war when you don't have a specific place that you know of and you attack, is something like a lot of skirmishes, quite costly, but skirmishes.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. As I understand it, the Jerusalem Brigade had some training between infantry and tanks and artillery. Did the paratrooper brigade have any experience training with tanks, mortars, artillery, engineers?
Say it again, please.
האם היה לכם אימון עם טנקים, ארטילריה, מרגמות, כמו שיוסי תיאר על החטיבה שלו?
No. I'm quoting Motakur. I'm quoting now Motoguru, who said that unfortunately, we were not trained with the combined fight with the tanks. I'm quoting. That's what to say.
I have part of the answer which Yossi does not know. When we prepared before entering into the war, I used my contacts with the Teleshomer base, and I arranged for all of our battalions a series of getting prepared to fight the tanks, the Egyptian tanks. And they were going over us. After they went over us, we would rise up and throw grenades. This was the preparation. When getting to Jerusalem, in my battalion, I had 2 Sherman tanks that were giving to me, helping to shoot at the places of the Jordanian before breaching. But one of the tanks got the problem with the cannon, and I left these 2 tanks to my colleague Yossi Fratkin, the battalion commander of the 28th, and one of these tanks helped him to go over and to fight. They call the death alley. They call it death alley. Something very, very difficult that they were confronted. So we did have 2 tanks and no more. And one anecdote, which is Katja Kahaner, who founded this munition hill. He told me he was with the 28th battalion, and he told me that he was near the tank, and then they discovered some soldiers, they thought Jordanians, on a building above them, and the tank was going to shoot at these soldiers. And Katja told me, I realized that it was you. So he had to off an effort to persuade the tank not to shoot at me. So this was the tank that we were there.
Just one more, if I may. In this part of the 1967 conflict, the political level seems to have intervened quite directly in some of the operations that you were undertaking, holding you back, asking you to delay, and then ultimately with the threat of a ceasefire. Did that really have a negative impact on what you were experiencing on the ground?
המעורבות של הדרג הפוליטי, האם זה השפיע עליך במשהו? כי כאן, לפי השאלה, הייתה מעורבות מאוד מאוד ישירה, כן ללכת, לא ללכת.
כן, מה?
האם הייתה השפעה למעורבות של הדרג הפוליטי?
היה בדרג של עוזי נרקיס בלבד. כניסה לעתיקה.
עוזי נרקיס זה לא דרג פוליטי.
At the level of Uzi Narkis, enter to the old city, not enter the Jerusalem city. That was the main issue.
Look, our battalion is meeting once a year in Jerusalem Day here in the Sheikh Jarrah area. We have some memorial place. And all along these years, 48 now, we know that we were soldiers who fought to save Israel. We were not involved in politics. We were not involved. And when I got to the Wailing Wall, I'm not a religious person, so I knew the stories, and I didn't know how historical move it will be. And even today, what we are not celebrating, we are memorating those who were killed in war, not in politics.
One more.
Sorry. You mentioned that later in your career you worked on research and development, and I would wonder if you could elaborate on something that you were able to implement or change based on your combat experience that impacted the Army? No, I don't mean, no secrets, but maybe a change in the way, something that you learned that was applied.
Look, I was complaining on the IDF not having enough, getting lessons from the war. I myself, I did my homework, and I did analyze what we did, what my people did, and what we did not do. And because of that, after the war was ended, I ordered one deputy commander, company commanders, and 2 company commanders to leave my battalion, because I knew that they did not pass the utmost occasion of being at war. And this battalion, when we got to the war of 73, and I was not the commander anymore, my deputy in Jerusalem was the commander, this battalion, reserve battalion, was selected to be the first to cross the canal on the dinghies and be the first bridge on the other side. So I think that it was, in my opinion, it was the best battalion but it was selected to do that. So I think that having learned the lessons, and soldiers know exactly who is worthwhile and who is not. You cannot fool the soldiers. And I think that by doing this kind of a very, very painful operation, I contributed to the level of this battalion. So this is what I did.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much.